All right, so welcome once again to the um fifth session of the data science program. Right, we're actually making a lot of progress. So far we've gone we've had four classes, four sessions where we talked about a lot of things, right? So I believe by now you're already getting comfortable with Python and you're already getting comfortable with the idea of working with some of these things that we've been looking at so far. So today we're going to continue from where we stopped last week, right? We're going to continue from where we stopped last week. But before we do that, I'm just going to do the correction, quickly do the correction, the assignment correction, and move to what we have today. Right. But before we do that, please someone tell us where we stopped last week or what we did last week. So just a reminder, a refresher, and just put it down on the group chat. You see where exactly. Okay. All right. Said if else elif. Okay, we stopped at conditional statements. Condition. All right. Okay, that's okay. So actually stopped at conditional statement last week. We did a lot. We did a lot last week. So although not much, but actually we learned some things last week, which we're going to continue from today. So today we're going to be stepping up. We're going to be stepping up, or we're going to be increasing gear a little bit, because each class is always a step further or a step ahead of what we've done already or what we did in the last class. So um, I'm going to share my screen now. Okay, so I'll quickly go over the assignments before we do that. So let's just quickly do the correction before moving ahead. All right. All right. So now this was your assignment for last week. As I said, I randomly pick an assignment from the ones I graded for correction to use as correction. So this is from Abigail David. I don't know if she's here, but this is your assignment. You did well, so that was why you have your assignment. So it doesn't mean other persons didn't do well. It's just a random selection. So yours might be here next time, or if to have it here, you have to actually do well in your assignments. So this is a simple and straightforward assignment. Basically, if you were in the class last week, right? If you were in class, you paid attention, you've gone through the video and everything. This is a straightforward assignment. So this assignment is testing us on theory on string formatting, right? So the question one is testing us on string formatting that we did. Question two is testing us on comparison operator. Question three to membership. So and that is basically how you have it, the idea behind the assignment. So it tests you on the different things that we did in class, right? So question one now, I asked three questions in this particular question. So I needed us to format a string using the three different string formatting method. Right, so we have the theories formatting, we have the percentage, we have the percent method, we have the format method, and we have the f string method. This is just straightforward. You understand the syntax already. So the first one is giving the variable name Alice, um, Alice and age 30. Use the old style formatting to construct and print the sentence Alice is 30 years old. Right, so you understand what you need to do here. So the second one, you have the variables item equal to coffee, price equal to 2.5, right? Maybe $2.5, right? So use the format method to format and print the string, right? So you would have something like this. The price of the coffee is $2.5. The third one is with the variables planet equals to Mars and distance equals to 54.6. Use an F string to print the following statement. Mars is 54.6 million kilometers away from Earth. So these are just simple string formatting that I was trying to test you on. So you have it here, and remember there's an instruction here, a note here before the questions. Note: use comment in your code. So it's actually easy to skip this particular note, but this is also part of this is also either remove marks from your total mark or add to it, right? So this will help you cultivate that habit of using comments in your code. So for every assignment I'll be giving you, ensure that you're always commenting on the code that you are writing. It's a very good practice, right? It's a very good practice. So don't just write code without any comment. So you write your comment and then you write your code, right? So I already taught us how to use comment and all of that. So this is just the syntax that we all know. I don't want to waste much time on that. So the second question, given two variables, A equals to 10 and B equals to 20, compare them and check if A is less than B, right? So very straightforward. You initialize your two variables and you use your comparison operator to check if A is less than B and what A is actually less than B. So you have true. So this is the output I should see, right? So this is the output I should see when grading. If I don't see true or if I see false, don't just know you failed it. Like this, that is not the answer to this particular question. So we have the third question. Create a list colors, right? So you have your list and then use membership operator to check if yellow is in colors. So this is what membership operation, right? Membership operation. So this is basically checking if an item is in a particular list. So in this case, yellow is not here. So what you are going to have is false. So for the question 4, we are using logical operation. So in this case, we are initializing two variables, 5 and 10, right? 5 and 10. So we are checking if x is less than y and x is not equal to y. So this is a logical operation that combines two comparison operations. So what you should have as your output is what's true. So with the next one here is assignment, decrement or increment operation rather. So you'd have a variable count. So I think some persons missed it here. So what I ask you to do here is take a variable which is count equals to 5 and then use a compound assignment operator to double its value, right? To double its value and then decrement it by 2. Decrement it by 2. So this is a very simple question, but it can be confusing. So when I say double, if you want to double something, what will you do? You will add that thing to itself. If you want to double 5, you add 5 to itself, right? So you can either do like this, count plus equals to 5, or say count plus equals to count. So you are basically doubling it, or you say count times equals to 2. So this is just straightforward, right? You're either multiplying it by itself. Sorry, you're either adding it to itself or multiplying it by 2. So when you double something, you are increasing it by by itself, like you are replicating it twice. So you can either multiply it to 2 or add itself to itself, basically, in that sense. So if you use any of this, yes, you are correct. So once you do that, you should get 5 times 2 is what? 10. So this variable should become 10. And then the next step is to decrement count, that is 10, which you've done here, by 2. So you now say 10 equals to 10 minus 2. So the answer is 8. So the output you have here is 8. You understand? So that's actually it for this question. Also quite straightforward. So the next question here is applying if statement with logical operators. So the question is, suppose we have mood equals to happy, then use logical operators to print mood is positive if mood is either happy or excited. So you now know that you can use your if statement. So you come and say if mood equal to happy or excited, then print mood is positive. So these are just questions that will test your knowledge on logical operators and if statement as well. So question 7, right? This one is now having multiple steps, right? So what I asked us to do here is take two variables, height. You have height 180 and you have weight 75. Then first you have to use compound assignment operators to first add 5 to height, right? Add 5 to height and then subtract 10 from weight. You add 5 to height. So height is 180, you add it and then subtract 10 from weight. Then finally check if height is greater than 170 and weight is less than 80 using logical operators. Then print healthy if both. So if you just carefully read the question and follow it, you should get your answer. So you should get an output of, this particular output, which is healthy, right? So the person is between this particular height and also the weight is, the person height is greater than this particular height and the person weight is less than this particular value. So the person is, I don't know, probably healthy. Right. So now the number 8 question is now you are now going to also be using if statements, right? So similar to yellows in colors and the other ones that you did. So given a list of fruits, use the not operator with a membership to check if mango is not in fruits, then print mango not found if true. So you basically do the same thing that you've done before to get that. So question 9, this one is quite tricky. So I take a longer step to answer. So the question here is check if the list low. So you have a list, which is this fruit list I initially there. I have a list here. So what I'm asking you to do is to check if this particular list has the following fruit: apple. You check if apple is here. If apple is here, then say yes, apple is here. You check guava, right? You check guava. If guava is here, you say guava is here. But if guava is not here, you are now going to add guava to this list, right? So you do the same thing for pawpaw and you do the same thing for avocado. So you are just updating your fruit list. So it can be maybe when you want to shop you want to go to the market. So you have a list and you want to confirm if you have some specific fruits in that list already. So you can use Python to just make it very easy. So to just compare the specific fruit with your list and see if it is there. If it is not there, then you add it to the list. So that is basically the idea in this particular question. So it will require you to write multiple statements for each of the fruits that we have there and add it to the fruits list. So that is it. So at the end of the output should have guava, pawpaw, and avocado added at the end of the fruit, because apple is already in the fruit, so you don't need to add apple again. You can't even add it because it will not run that particular command. So the last question here is also another if else statement question. So this one will actually include elif, right? And the other one didn't include elif, just if and else. So in this case, I required you to write a Python program that takes the following students' exam score and determine their grade. So you have student A, student B, and student C. So you want to check each of these students to know which grade you are going to give them. So you can actually write a Python code to automate that process. So you can now see the application of Python. If you are working, there was someone that was working that asked me a question the other time about how he can apply data science in his administrative role in school. So if you don't already have an automated system where you automate the grading of your students, you can apply this. You can actually just write a Python script that takes in an input. The input here would be a grade. So once you give it a grade, it will give you an output, right, directly, which is going to be that grade. It might be F, D, E, whatever it is. So depending on the grading system you are using, you will get the appropriate output. So there's a way you can do it to actually just present it properly, right? So this is a very good application of Python. So I expected us to do that in this particular question. So in this question, you should have multiple if-else statements. So for each of the grade category, right? So you have them here, and then you just write them. We don't want to go through all this because of time. So at the end of everything, you should get student A is having grade C, student B should have grade D, and student C should have grade A. So this person didn't appropriately format the string very well. You should put A here. This one should be C, student C grade, student C grade, student C grade, student C grade, and student C grade. So the same thing here. So you have student B grade, student B grade, student B grade, student B grade, and then student B grade. And also the same thing here, student A grade, student A grade, student A. So just also try to pay attention to your string, right? So you can see you're giving us student A grade is equals to C, student B grade is D, and then student C grade is A. So that is it for the assignment. If you did this assignment, big ups to you, because you've actually implemented almost everything we did in last class, and you should have an idea on how to do them. So you can keep practicing, right? But this assignment would have helped you to gain a better understanding of these concepts that you have, right? That we've learned so far. Okay, someone said did all of this and I was still scored 9 about 10. There's probably something that you missed. Can DM me, just send me a DM, and then I'm going to go over your assignment to be sure. Right, so that's it for the assignment. If you have any complaints, please feel free to reach out to me. Right. So now when you're complaining about an assignment, you can come to my DM for that. Right. When it is about assignment, you come to my DM. Right. But when it's a general question, then you just ask that in the general group chat. So those that might have issues, one issue or the other with the assignments, you feel the grade you are giving isn't what you're supposed to be giving, then just you can reach out to me. I don't mind. Nobody is holding anything here. We are actually very transparent, and we'll let you know what exactly made you get what you got. Right. So yeah, that is it for the assignments. That's it for the assignment. So we are going to be going into what we have for today. All right. So before I continue, I want to be sure everyone can hear me properly and everyone can follow me. and everyone is following me. All right. Okay. Okay. Great. So today we are going to continue from where we stopped. So for some of us that might be wondering why I didn't send a new material for this week, that's because we are still using the same material that we used last week. So after today's material, then there'll be a new material for tomorrow's class, which I'm going to drop right after this class. So that's if we are able to finish up with everything we have for today. So let's quickly move on to what we have for today, right? So we looked at last week. We looked at string formatting, right, which we all understand now. We looked at types of operation in Python, comparison operations, logical operations, assignment operations, membership operations, identity operations. We also looked at conditional statements. We looked at if statement, if else statement, if else statement, right? So we looked at all these things, right? And these are additional concept that you can look up on your own. Someone asks if we can write it in one line. I told you about the ternary operator. So if you actually looked at this particular material, you're going to see all this. Right, so those are just additional things that you can just look at on your own. We are going to be looking at the main things in class. Right, so today we are going to start with a new concept called loops and iteration. Right, loops and iteration. Now this is a very, very interesting concept in Python. So I want everybody to pay attention. Like, this is a very interesting concept that you are going to be using and will be very, very helpful. So what are loops? Loops basically are they are fundamental constructs that allows for the execution of a block of code repeatedly, either for a fixed number of times or until a certain condition is met. Right? Let me say it again. Loops in Python are a fundamental construct that allows for the execution of a code block repeatedly, either for a fixed number of times or until a certain condition is met. I'm going to explain that, but let's move on. So in Python, we have two types of loops. We have for loops and we have while loops. Let me come again. We have two types of loops. We have for loops, as you can see here, for FOR, for loops, and we have while loops, WHILE, while loops, right? So these are the two basic type of loops we have in Python. So these two loops are used uniquely. They are different in the way they are being used, right? But the idea is still the same thing. So what loops basically is repeatedly doing something, right? Let's say you want to do something now. You want to do the same operation, but you want to do it like 10 times. So instead of manually typing or writing code 10 times to do that thing, you can easily use loops to just execute it that same number of times, right? So they have a syntax for it, which we are going to go through. So loops actually make some of our code, it makes us write a more efficient and faster code. Instead of typing it repeatedly, so if you want to do something, you just come and write the code for that thing. You write it again until you have written it 10 times. But with for loops, you can, or with any of these loops, you can actually just write a loop statement, a for loop statement that will do that same thing 10 times, but in with a very short code. So we are going to look at that. We're going to look at the implementation, but let's move on so you understand the concept. So I told you that we have two types of loops. We have for loops and we have while loops, right? So for loop is the most common one you would come across. It is actually the the most used types of the most used type of loops in Python. Like this is, let's say you want to write loops, like you are going to write loops 20 times in Python. Out of that 20 times, 17 of those times you are going to use for loops. That is how common and frequent you'll be using it when using loops, or when doing loops in Python. The other one, while loop, is also important, but it's not as commonly used as right. For loops, Python is used to iterate over a sequence. Remember, I thought like just to repeat my first sequence. So the focus to iterate over a sequence such as list, tuple, dictionary, set, or string, and execute a block of code for each in the sequence. So what this thing means is that it picks each item in that sequence and does something to it. So based on what you specify, it's going to perform that action on this sequence, right? So it is particularly useful for tags that require action on each element of an iterable object, or when you need to repeat the block of code a known number of times. So this should start giving you an idea of what loops is all about, right? So let me just come again for those that might have missed it. So I said loops in Python, they are fundamental construct that allows for the execution of a block of code repeatedly. All right, so let's go straight to the code aspect. So let me quickly open this. So we'll just come here and say markdown. Loops in Python. I'll comment on for loops. All right, so we are going to be showing us, I'm going to be showing us how we use loops. So using for loops. So now, as I said before, that loops is used to execute a code over a sequence, right? Or to do something repeatedly. You understand? So let's just come here and just write out some things. Let's just create a sequence. Let's see names. I'll come and say Abigail. I'll say David. I'll say Usman. I'll say George. I would say okay, Michael. I'll say boom. Okay, so now this is a list, right? This is a sequence. Now let's say the task we want to do here is we want to print out each name in the list using string formatting, right? So let's say the action I want to perform here is I want to print out each of the name on this list now using string formatting, and the string output I want to get is okay, let's see. We have Abigail. We can just say print this is Abigail. You can say this is David, or we can come and let's just make it make sense. You can say Abigail is on the list. I can come and say David is on the list. So if you want to do this thing manually, right? If I want to print this manually from this list without using for loop, what I'm going to do is just to use the index of the element on this list. So now, based on what we've talked about previously on indexing, what is going to be the index of Abigail on this list? Based on what we've talked about before as regarding index, what's going to be the indexing of Abigail? Exactly. It's going to be 0, right? So I can come here and say print names. I will come and use F string and say names. I will say 0 is on the list, right? Let me put. So what am I missing in this particular print statement? Now, what am I missing? There's something that I'm missing here. So I want us to point it out. What exactly am I missing? Because if I print this, it's going to give me an error. So what am I missing here in this string I'm about to print now? Exactly. Coily braces. That's very good. So I'll put coily braces here. So once I print this, you see I'm going to get what? Abigail is on the list. So to do that for all the names here, I'll just have to come and type them and say print F and put names and say 1, which is for David, and say is on the list, right? So I will have to do the same thing for everybody. So let's see. I have to do the same thing for everybody here. I'll say 2, 3. I'll just come and just say 4. 5, 6. I'm going to have your 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So just 5, right? So I'll come here and print it. So you see, I'm going to get each of them. I'm going to get Abigail is on the list, David is on the list, Usman is on the list. So I'm going to get everything. So I've achieved that task, right? But you can see that it is actually stressful, like writing it manually. Let's assume you now have like 40 names, or you have like 100 names on a particular list or a sequence. How are you going to do it? Will you start doing the manually, like doing all this manual stuff that we just did now? No, that is where for loops come in. So for loops actually kind of do this iteration in a more efficient way. So how do we use for loops? So let's just quickly demonstrate that. So I'm going to create a new cell here. I'll say using for loops. So I'm going to come here and say the syntax for for loop is you start by typing for. You type for. The next thing that would follow is you can use any. It's just like when you want to define a variable, you can use anything. You can use any word basically. So in this case, you can just put anything there. So because we have our names here, let's just copy this names list. Copy it here. So please let's pay attention, right? So we're going to get this because this is a new concept. So for now, you are going to say name. in names. So this is basically how you write your for introductory part of your for loop. For name in names, then colon. Now let me explain what these things mean. This for now is your keyword, is what Python recognize and know that you want to write a for loop. This name that follows it now is a variable. What happens is that in every iteration or in every loop, this name would be assigned to each of these elements, or each of these elements here will be assigned to this name variable, right? So it's just the same thing as saying name. You say in iteration 1, name is equals to names 0. Iteration 2, in iteration 2, name is equals to names 1. In iteration 3, name equals to what? Names 2. So this is what is happening in this first statement. So it will continue assigning this particular name variable, which is all these elements we have here, to this name variable until it reaches the end, and then it will stop. So I'm just showing you what is happening during for loop, when for loop is running. So we're going to have for name in names. This is what happens when you do this, right? You now put your colon and press enter. It will take you to the next line. So this next line is what? The same thing we have in your if statement. So what do we usually put in the next line based on what we talked about in if statement? So what do you think we're going to put here now? So it's the same thing as if statement. So I want us to give a response to that question. So remember in if statement, this place is what? The condition. Why the next line is what? Action. Exactly. That is what I want to hear. Action. Thank you, Azan. Kolawole. Action. Exactly. So in this particular for loop, yeah, it's exactly the same thing. But in this, we would have our loop here first of all, then press enter to the next line, and we have our action. So our action here is this same action that we want to do, this print that we want to do now. So I'm going to come here and now say print. I'll use string formatting, right? The same thing. I'll say name is on the list. So you can see what's happening here, right? This is our for loop. If I run this, we're going to see that it prints out everything. The same thing that we have here is the same thing that we have here, but just 2 lines of code, we're having the same thing. But in this place, we have to write 1, 2, 3, 4, 6 lines of code. So what happened here is that the first this loop or this particular statement is a loop. So it will perform this print statement first on Abigail, print Abigail. It will go again, come to the next item on this list, perform it on David, come again, perform it on Usman, come again, perform this action on George, come again, perform this action on Michael, come again, perform this action on Taiwo, until it reaches the end of the list. That is when it will now stop. Understand? So this is what a loop means. This is how a for loop works in Python. Understand? So it performs an action over and over again, the same action. So this print statement is the action, but it does not perform it once. It performs this action several times on what? On a list or a sequence. So do we understand? This is actually how we write for loops in Python. So let me give us another example. So let's use another example. So another for loop example. So we're going to come here now and say we have our lists or name. Let's say we have numbers. Or let's say we have grade, right? Student grade. Student grades. So I can just come here and say, let's say we have, let's say, 67, 46, 75, 35, 20, 80, 66, 44, 59. So let's just use this. So these are student grade. Maybe let's say you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. You have 10 students in your class. They wrote an exam and they got this particular score. You understand? And because of some persons here that got low scores, let's change this one to 43. Let's change this one to 35. So the pass mark here should be 50. But some of them were not really. So you want to add mark to their grade. So you want to add, let's say, 5 marks to everybody. So instead of doing it manually, you can use for loop to do that, right? So how do you do that? You come here. So the first requirement to use a for loop is that you must have a sequence that you want to loop over, right? That you want to loop over. But I'm going to talk about something else, another way we can use for loop, right? Okay, someone asked a question, but let's continue. Go to look at that later. So come and say for what am I going to put here now? Following for what am I going to put? I just need a suggestion. I'm going to use your suggestions. So just give me a suggestion. What do you think I should put there? For grade in what? So what's going to come next? What should come next after in student? Exactly, the variable student grades. Understand? So that's the syntax. You come next. So I'm going to come here and say, okay, I want to add 5 to each of them. So I'll just come and say print grade plus 5, right? If I run that, you see that each of them now has, or I can just come and say, instead of using print directly, I can say new grade equal to grade plus 5. I'll come and say print new grade. So you can see now that I have new set of grade, right? So I have 72, 48. So this basically updated grades from this initial grade that we have here. So we basically perform this operation on all the grades that we have. So instead of doing them manually, we can use for loop to just automate them. So you might not really understand how efficient or how important for loop is until you are working with a list that is like 100. We have 100 items in that list. So for loop will just do it for you very, very fast. Just loop over everything till you reach the end of the sequence. That's it, right? So these are actually simple examples of using for loop. Basically, there are a lot of things you can perform in this action part of it. You can do a lot of things here, right? So it just depends on what particular action you want to perform or what particular task you want to do, right? So we can't really exhaust the examples, but these two examples should give you an idea of how to use for loops, right? So let's quickly look at another thing, another example. This is the last one for for loops. So let's look at using range in for loop. So I'm going to be introducing a new concept to us. I'm going to introduce a new concept to us. All right, as long as I was saying, can we print grade? So, like you can do a lot of things basically, right? You just try it on your own, right? There are a lot of things you can perform in the action part or in this particular part of your for loop. So we can't really go over everything. As long as the code is correct, it's going to run. Trust me, as long as it's correct, it is going to run. So let's just move on. So come here and say, okay, let me just quickly do that so you see it. So if I come and say grade plus equals to 5, and I print grade. Sorry, print grade so that we have it here, right? We have the updated grade. So it's still basically the same thing. So just know how you do that. So just leave it at this grade plus 5. So print new grade. So you just test them on your own. You can see that it worked, right? So now we are going to look at what we call range. So range is a function that you use in for loops. So it's spelled range, R-A-N-G-E, right? R-A-N-G. So this is a function that is used to generate a sequence of numbers. So if I come here and say range 1 to 10, what is going to happen here is that it's going to generate a sequence from 1 to 9. So if I print this, it's not going to give me that sequence immediately. It's just going to give me this output. But to convert it, I'm just going to convert it to list and say lists, right? And you can see the output here. So this range is a way of generating sequences of numbers. So if I put 10 here and I put 100 here, so it's going to give me numbers between 10 and what? 99. 10 and 100. So it's going to be from 10 to what? 99. So if I run this, you can see that it's giving me a list of numbers 10 to 19. So this is a new function that you need to know in Python range, right? So you can come and say range from 0 to 10. If you want to print out numbers from 0 to 10, you increase the last number here by 1, because if you put 10 here, it is going to exclude this value, which is 10. So let's print. You see that it gives you 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, excluding 10. So to include 10, you just add 1 to that particular number. So that is just how Python is. So just keep that at the back of your mind if you are trying to generate a sequence of number. So we have another last thing you can put in this function, which is called step. It is called step. So normally the default step is 1, right? That is the default step. So it is going to increase the numbers or the sequence by 1. So you can see 0 to 1, the difference is 1, 1 to 2, 1. But if I change it to 2, it's going to step by 2. So if I run this, you see that is now skipping one number, jumping over one number to the next. So we have 0, skip 1, 2, skip 3, 4, skip 5, 6, like that, like that, like that. So that is how you can actually manipulate the sequence that you get. So if I put 3 here, you'll see how it is generating the sequence by skipping to the third value, right? So if I want to generate from 0 to 100, right, or 100, I'll put 101. I want to jump by 5, I can just put 5, or let's say I want to jump by 10. You can see it will give me 0, 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60. So this is just another very cool function in Python that you are going to be using a lot, and you would use it with your for loop a lot. That's why I'm introducing this function to us. So how do we use range with for loops? So let's assume you want to do something repeatedly, right? You want to do something repeatedly. You can actually use this range function. So we'll come here, say using range with for loops. They can come here and say for x or for number in range. Let's say you want to do that thing 10 times. You say 0, 10. Now, when you are writing the range function in your for loop statement, don't put list here. You don't need to put lists because it automatically loops over the generated sequence for you. So you just leave it like this. For num in range 0 to 10, remember when we're trying to like print it out here or see the output, we have to put lists so that it's going to show us the output. But if we not put any list here, it's going to generate it, but we can't see it actually. It will just give us this particular output. So that is the same way you're going to put it in your for loop. So in your for loop, you just put range with the numbers that you want it to generate. So I'll say for num in sequence, let's say my task here, I want to like print Python is simple 10 times. Instead of coming and saying, let me comment this. Okay, I want to print out Python is simple 10 times. So instead of coming and the normal way you do it is coming here and saying print Python is simple. Come here and say print Python is simple. Print. So you get the gist now, right? Python is simple. So if you want to do it manually, you have to print everything manually until you get to the 10th. Let's come here. How many do we have here? So I'm going to come here. So you have to print everything. So you can see it is printing Python is simple 10 times, right? So this is how you would do it normally without for loop. But with for loop, it's going to be way easier. Let's just comment this out. So with for loop, I can just say for num in range, for number in range 10, print 3. Print Python is simple. So you can see it has automatically printed Python is simple 10 times for us without going through the stress of typing it out or writing the code individually. So you can now see the importance of for loop, and now you can also use it with range. So we've looked at how we can use for loop with sequences. You can use it with string, you can use it with tuple, you can use it with dictionary, you can use it with any sequence that you know, right? You can basically use it with all of that, right? So let's just move on. So before we move on, I hope everyone can hear me clearly and we are still following. All right, great. So we are going to move ahead to what we have here. Next thing we have here. So we have what we call while loops. So this is the other kind of loop rather we have in Python. We've looked at for loop, right? And we've looked at while loop too. So we are going to look at while loop now, and we're going to see how it is different from for loop, right? So let's quickly. Oh, someone wrote a code in the chat box that print Python is simple times 10. Okay. Let's see what that's going to give us. So I guess you are trying to say that is another way of doing the same thing that we just did with our for loop. So um you can see the output here, right? And you can see that it's not going to give us the same thing with our for loop. So this is a different thing. What this is doing here is that it is just like it's just multiplying our string 10 times and outputting it and giving an output basically. So we are not going to get that natural output that we're going to get when we are printing out Python in simple or printing out any string that we want to print out. You understand? So just understand that. So for loop is a different thing entirely from this thing that we are doing or this particular code that we have here. Right. So yeah, that is good. That is good that you pointed that out. So let's look at while loop. So what is while loop? So remember, I when I was explaining what loops are, I said loops are a fundamental construct that allows for execution of a block of code repeatedly, either for a fixed number of times. This fixed number of times is for loops, or until a certain condition is met. This one is what for while loops. So for loops is over a sequence. While loop is what? Based on a condition. That is the difference between while loop and a for loop. So a while loop now, as you can see here, it executes a block of code as long as a specified condition is true. Like, just keep that at the back of your mind. While loop will execute a block of code as long as a specified condition is true. It is used when the number of iterations is not known before the loop starts. So we are going to see how we implement that, right? So, but just understand that it is based on condition. It is just like the if statement. If statement is based on a condition before the action is executed. But the difference is that if statement, it does not repeatedly do that thing. It just print out that action once. But while loop, if that condition is true, it will continually print out the block of code that you've written under the while loop, right? So it will keep iterating until the condition becomes false. That's basically how a while loop works. If you continue executing that code, until the condition becomes false, right? So basically, how do we use while loop, right? Let's quickly look at it, and just change this to a markdown. Come here. Say, all right. So as I said initially that while loop is not as common as for loop. For loop, you would mostly be using you'll be using most of the time, right? But while loops have specific use cases. In this while loop, you don't really have a sequence that you want to iterate over. You just have, let's say, a variable, right? An integer or what have you. And you want to perform an operation on it, and you want to compare it with something. So the comparison will always give you either true or false. So as long as that thing you're comparing is true, it will continue executing the code for you until it becomes false. So it might be sounding abstract to you, but once we finish this implementation, you're going to understand it better. So let's just quickly look at how we can do that. So let's initialize the variable. Let's come here and say num equals to what? 0. So this is a variable that we're going to be comparing. So for our while loop, what we are going to write first is what? While. So you can see it has automatically become green, right? Because this is a what? Python keyword. So Python will know that, oh, this person wants to execute a while loop, right? So you say while, what will follow is this variable here, while num. Now, what you write in this initial place, or in this what you write initially is actually a condition. It's different from for loop. In a for loop, you write you loop over a sequence, or you initialize a sequence or variables from a sequence in that first line of code. But for while loop, you indicate a condition, right? You just write out a condition, just like your if statement. So you can come here and say while num is greater than, let's say, 5. So this is what you start with usually in your while loop. You write out a condition. Let's come here and say condition. So this particular statement now, is it true or false? So this particular statement I wrote here, is it true or false? Exactly. So anything I write under it, will it be executed or not? If I come and say, if I come here and say print the statement is what false, or the statement is true rather. So if I run this, nothing will be treated, nothing will happen, right? So this might be looking like an if statement. Like it might be looking like an if statement, but not an if statement. It is a loop. So you're going to see it in action when the condition is true. You understand? So if I now come here and say and add to the variable that I've initialized initially, let me say I add num to, let's say, I add 1 to num, right? So in this case, I'm increasing this particular variable here by 1, right? So just so I'm increasing this particular variable by 1. So once this, okay, let me see. So in this case now, is this statement going to be executed? What's going to happen here? So nothing is not like, I just want to show you that nothing will happen. If I run this code, nothing will happen. It will not add anything at all. Why? Because the condition is false. But once this condition is now true, so this condition now has been changed to num is less than 5. So now the condition has now been changed. So the condition is now true. So for the fact that it is true, the code block will be executed. So first of all, it is going to print this statement out, and then it's going to come here and add 1 to this number. So what this number will now become, let me come here and print it. I will now come and say print num, right? So print num. I just want to show you what is happening in each iteration. Let me remove this one. So now this code is going to be executed, right? If I run it. So this is what I'm going to get. Now let me put this here. So basically, you can see what's happening here. It executed this code 5 times. So now this is the initial number here, 0, right? So we have 0 here, printing it. So it added 1 to 0, and we have 1, right? So this particular output here is the first iteration. So once it executes this code, it now comes back to it here. So in this case now, num is now equal to 1 because we've changed it in this particular place. So it now brings this updated variable here and compare it with this 5 again. So in this case, num will be 1 is less than 5. So 1 is less than 5 is true. It will execute this block of code, come here, increase it again. So num will now be increased to what? 2. Num will now be increased to 2. It will come here. It will compare 2 with 5. Oh, 2 is less than 5. It is still true. So it is going to execute this block of code. So num is what? It will now add 1 to 2. So num is now 3. It will now come here and say num equals to 3. It will now bring this 3, compare it with 5. Do the same thing. Come here. Num equals to 4. Do the same thing. Num equals to 5. So when it comes to this point, num is equals to 5. It will now compare 5 less than 5. So at this point, the condition will now change from true to what? False. So once it changes from true to false, it will now stop. It will not execute the code again. That is exactly how while statement works. Understand? That is what stops while statement. If the condition remains true, it will continue executing it till eternity. It will not stop at all. But as long as the condition becomes false, it will stop the execution. You understand? So that is the looping aspect of it. That is what that is where the loop comes in here, and that is what differentiates it from if statement. You understand? So the reason why this is happening is because we are increasing the number here by 1. So if you come here, you see 0, 1, you see it's now 1, it now increases it to 2. 2 is now compared, right? And we now increase it to 3. 3 is compared, increase it to 4. 4 is compared, increase it to 5. So it stops at 5 because when 5 was compared to 5 here, it was false. So it did not increase it again. It did not execute this code. So that is basically what while statement is, and that is how you use while statement, right? So there are specific cases where you need to do this particular operation in Python. So you need a while statement for that. Understand? So there's just something that you normally see when using while statement. There's what we call infinite loop. Infinite loop. So an infinite loop is basically a loop that does not stop executing. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to create a new file for that. So just to demonstrate that to you, because I'm pretty sure that some of us here are going to encounter that and will be like, what's happening to my code? Like my system is hanging and I don't even understand what's happening. So for you to not run into that situation, I'm going to use it here. You can see that I'm opening a new notebook because it's going to basically render it useless. So an infinite loop is when, let me see, infinite loop. So to create an infinite loop, basically there's no need for it. You don't have any practical need for an infinite loop, but just for you to avoid it, An infinite loop is where you say while equal while true. So this statement is true. You understand? So this syntax that we wrote here basically mean this code here or this statement is true. If I say while true, print this will continue printing till infinity. Right? So this might actually crash this whole process, but it's just for you to see it. So I can come here and just either you say while true, or you come here and initialize a variable and say for number, or let's just put it here. You can say 4 is greater than 3. So this statement is true, right? Right? It will continue printing or executing this code because we are not modifying this statement at all. We are not modifying it. This statement is true. So this thing will continue printing till infinity. So if I run this, you see that it will continue printing, right? It will continue printing. You see it is printing till like basically you can't end. So just try as much as you can to avoid this. So if you are writing anything here, try not to either you modify this statement here or even make sure you modify your statement so that it will get to a point where this statement becomes false, right? So that is just it for that. Let's just end that. So because that's actually not going to make us do anything. Is we are basically that notebook is useless at this point, right? To continue running until it max out your computer memory. So just look out for that. So that is while loop for you, right? Like while loop works based on condition, for loops works on cases. Those are the differences that between these two loops. So I believe that has explained it. If you have questions, you can always ask at the end of the class. Right. So exactly. So as this person said, while loop becomes infinite, we forget to increment or decrement the variable within the loop. Yeah, exactly. So always make sure that if you are writing a while loop, you are either modifying that variable that the truth statement is changed from truth to false at a particular point. So the loop will stop. Understand? So these are just the few examples that we have here. You can practice more on your own, and the assignment will also help you practice it. So what are the common cases of using while loop? So you can use it in iterating until a certain condition is met. Someone is asking, can it be used to create a cyber threat or virus? I'm not going to answer that question. So do not say I was complicit in a cyber attack. why are you asking me that kind of question? Yeah, it actually can, obviously. Like obviously, as you can see, it can. So I think there's something called distributed denial of service, DDoS. So it's when you overload a computer with something. So instead of you doing it manually, you can just create a while loop that constantly loads a computer with something and use their resources and everything. So a while loop is actually a very good tool for that particular case, which I don't know, you shouldn't even be thinking about it, right? So yeah. So yeah, that is Python for you. Python is very versatile. You can use it for a lot of things. So those in cybersecurity too, they are learning Python as well, right? So these are the things you can use while loop for, right? So you can just go through that. We have some other control statements here. Loop control statement. We have break. We have continue. We have else. So I'm looking at time now, but these are statements that you might not really be using, right? I'm going to see, let's quickly go over to function. if we have enough time, we're going to come back to this because this is just a minor stuff. So let's quickly go over to functions. Yeah. So I just want us to finish the things we have for today. So if we have enough time, then we can look at this other loop control statement. So this loop control statement are basically there are basically ways to control your loop, right? So if you have a while loop that is running infinitely, you can actually add a break statement, right, to kind of break out of the loop. And so don't worry, we are going to look at that, but let's quickly look at functions, right? This is very, very important. So now we've looked at conditional statements, we've looked at loops and iteration. Now we're going to be looking at functions. We're going to be looking at functions. Hope everyone is still following at this point. I need responses. Hope everyone is still following. All right. All right. Okay, that's great. So this notebook is already available on the Google Classroom. This notebook is the notebook we used in the last class, right? In the last class. So God knows. I'm going to answer the question, right? I'm going to answer the question. Marcelinos, you said you asked the question. Okay, don't worry. Just take note of your questions. When the time for questions come, you can ask. For now, let's just finish what we have right now. So we're going to be looking at functions in Python. So this is not your first time of hearing the word function. So we've actually been talking about function. We started with the print function that we are familiar with. We moved on to other types of function like the type functions. We looked at the range function, which we looked at today too, right? So these are all functions, right? But we actually have different types of functions, right? We have we're going to look at all those things, right? So that's why I want to quickly go through functions before we do any other thing. All right. So now what is function? Functions in Python, they are defined blocks of reusable code. So this is the most important. This is the key. This is the most important aspect of functions. They are reusable, right? Functions are reusable code designed to perform a specific task or a set of related tasks. So the reason why we have function is so that we don't have to always do something over and over again, right? So let's say you want to you want to write a code that will be able to like add your student grade or add let's say check a list and if and compare a particular item with that list. If that item is not in that list, it's going to add the item to the list. So instead of writing the code every time, you can just define a function that does that. So if you just call the function, that code will be executed. You don't need to write it again and again and again. That is what functions are. So they are blocks of reusable code designed to perform a specific task or a set of related tasks. So they are fundamental to Python programming. So you see it everywhere. Like functions is like the core of Python. Like almost everything you be doing is functional. Even the if statement you've learned, the conditional statement, and the for loop, all those things they'll be embedded in functions. You understand? They'll be part of functions because sometimes you want to define a function that will loop over a sequence or do a particular thing based on a condition. So all these things can be wrapped inside a function. We are going to look at how to define functions and basically just how to work with them. So in Python, function consists of several parts. So just follow me here. I understand that it's easier to understand while showing you in code, but I need you to understand it first before we move on to the code aspect. So the function, just know that the function consists of several parts. The first is the function name. We now have the parameters or arguments. We have the function body, and we have the return statement. Let me go back again. So these are the 4 part functions. We have the function name. This one is very easy. You have to include it. Is very, very important. The next one is the parameters or arguments. So this is actually optional. You can write a function without including any parameter or argument. We have the function body. This one is important, of course, because this is where you define everything you want your function to be doing. And then you have your return statement. So this return statement is optional. You might choose to add your return statement. You might choose not to add your return statement. So it will not prevent you from writing a function, but you understand how to use them and why it can be important in some cases, right? So let's just quickly look at them individually. So the function name is the identifier for the function, which is used to call it later. So like we have the print function. Let me just come here. So let's be showing us as we are explaining it, so it makes sense. All right, so we have the function name. So whenever I write type print, this print is the function name. If I come here and say type, this type is the function name. If I say range, this range is the function name. Understand? So that's what we mean by function name. So all these functions I just showed you now, they are already defined. Python has already defined them for us, so we can call them anytime we want so that they can perform a particular action, right? But I'm going to teach us how we can define our own functions too, right? So we can call it as we will call all these things that we are seeing now, right? So this is the function name, right? So just keep that at the back of your mind. Very, very important. Let's just continue. So we have parameters or arguments, right? So parameters or arguments are, so we have parameters are, okay, let's just quickly go here. So parameters are the things that are inside the brackets of the functions. So your function will always come with brackets. Very, like you have seen it consistently as we've been giving examples. Functions always come with brackets. So your print, whatever is inside this print function is your argument or parameter. So these things are used interchangeably, but I'm going to tell you the differences when we start defining our function. So if I come here and say print, this is a print function. So this particular string I passed in here now is an argument. So these are new concepts now that you should be getting familiar with. This is an argument. So if I come here and put type 45.7, this 45.7 is an argument. That is the Python name of the thing inside that function, right? Because that is what the function uses to execute the code, right? So this range here, if I come and put 1 and 10, so these two values here, they are arguments. So we have two arguments here. We have just one argument here, and we have just one argument here. You understand? So you can call them arguments or parameters. So they're almost interchangeable, right? So these are what arguments are. This is the Python, the function name, and this is the argument or parameter, right? So let's just move on. So we have the function body. So we're going to look at this when we start defining our function, and we have our return statement. So just try to understand this function name, parameter, and then we're going to look at the function body and return statement in a minute, right? So we've looked at the types of functions that I just gave you: print, type, and range. Now we can actually define our own function. Like, let's say we want to create a function that does something. We can define it manually, right? And always call it whenever we need it. So let's just come here and try to define our functions. Right, but before we do that, let me just quickly I think this one should even be before that. So we have two types of function basically. Before we start defining our function, we have built-in functions and we have user-defined functions. Let me come again. We have built-in functions and we have user-defined functions. So all these ones I showed you here, print, type, range, even this string that for converting something to string, list, and all those things you've been using so far, all of them are built-in functions. They are built-in in Python. So you can just call them to do something that you want to do, right? So Python they've already defined it. The developers, Python developers, people that created Python, they have defined it already. So you can now just call it, right? So these are built-in functions. So there are a lot of them. There are a lot of built-in Python functions, right? So we are going to be coming across plenty of them as we proceed. So we have the second type, which is user-defined functions. So this user-defined functions is the one that you yourself, you as the Python programmer, can define and create based on your specific need. So sometimes you might not really see a function that is in Python that is built in that can do what you want to do. So you now have to define it on your own. So these are functions that are defined by the programmer to perform custom tasks, right? So we're going to look at that. So we have the last one, anonymous functions, lambda functions. This one is just extra stuff. You can just look that up. So, but these are the two main types of functions we have: built-in and user-defined functions, right? So let's quickly look at how we can define our own function, right? So we have introduced you to the syntax of for loops. I've introduced the syntax of while loops. Now let me introduce you to the syntax of defining a function, right? How do we define our own function? So let me come here. Defining a function. So to define a function, you will start with the keyword def. You can see the same thing with while, the same thing with for, the same thing with if. So once you put def, Python interpreter will know, oh, this person wants to define a function. So what follows it is the function name. The function name. So the function name can be anything. It's just like a variable name. It can be anything. So you can just make sure that it's something that makes sense, right? That actually explains what your function is doing. But it should be short. It should not be long, right? So like we have in this case, print, type, range, string. This is a function name. So while they were defining it, they came here and said def and said print, and then put this bracket and then put something inside here, right? So this is basically how it was defined. So to define your own function, let's say now we want to define a function that takes a let's just define a very simple function. We want to define a function that takes an input and multiply it by 2, right? And it will give us the results. So let's come and say multiply, right? So this is the function name, and then we'll come here and put. Now, I told you about argument and parameter. So while defining your function, the thing you put inside the bracket is called your parameter. While when calling your function, what you put is called your argument. You understand? So these are the two different this is the main difference between argument and parameter, but sometimes it can be used interchangeably. So there's not really a strict rule that you should follow it, but this is just the nuanced difference between an argument and a parameter, right? While you are defining your function, whatever you put, so let me just complete this particular. So this is the first line of defining a function. You write the def, and then you write the function name, and you put your bracket, open and close bracket, and then your semicolon. But now inside this bracket, you can actually choose to put a parameter inside or not. So depending on what your function is doing, you can have a parameter there or not. You understand? So now in this case, I want to actually have a value that I'm going to put, because I want to create a function that would multiply my value with 2 or by 2, right? So I'll come here and just type anything. I can just say a or x or number or anything. You understand? So there's no strict rule to follow in naming your parameter. So if it's just one parameter that you want, you can put one parameter. You understand? If it's 2 parameters, you can put num and say num1 and come and say num2. If there are 3 parameters, you can say num3. So these are actually how to put or define functions with parameters. So in this case now, okay, let's just say I want to define a function. Okay, let me come here. Now, remember when I introduced comments to us and docstring, I told us that docstring is like comment, but it's used inside the function to explain what our function is doing. Now you can now actually use a docstring. So after you've defined you've defined the initial part of your function, okay, in this case now I just want to have 2 parameters here. So I want to multiply this first number with the second number here. So I'll come here and say okay, this function takes 2 parameters or arguments, whatever. So just and multiply them. Right, so that is it. That's basically what your function does. Understand? So I can now come and now write the main function block or the body of the function. So this is where I now start to tell or define the function properly. So what I want to do here is to multiply number 1 and number 2. So I will come and now say product is equals to num1 times num2. You can see that we are now using this operator, multiplication operator. So what we are doing here, we are multiplying these 2 arguments here, and we are assigning it to a variable here, right? I can now come here and say return product. So I've defined the function. Like this is actually how to define the function. A very simple function. So there are different parts of this function as we start. This is the function name, multiply is the function name, right? Let me go back to that other place. So we have function name, we have parameters or arguments, which are optional, we function body, and we have return statement, which is also optional. So as you can see, this multiply is our name, right? Num1 and num2, they are our parameters, arguments, right? Now, it's not important to include docstring. You can actually choose not to include docstring. Just have your function code straightforward like that. So most of the time, you don't even need to include docstring. It's only when you are working in a team, right? So it's important that you include docstring so that you explain what your function is doing. So when the other person is trying to use your function, they can just go through the documentation and see the explanation that you've given, right? So that is the importance of docstring, right? So let's just put that there. So just for the sake of learning. So what follows is the function body. So this is what the function does. This particular line of code, it takes these parameters here, multiply them, and return it to a product or assign it to a product variable, and then we come here and return. So this return statement can be confusing, but let me remove it first and put print product. So you can have your return statement, you can choose not to have a return statement, or you can choose to have a return statement, right? So, but let's just first use this print product. So I'm going to execute, what's the problem? Product number. Okay, let's see that we're having an indentation error. So let's be sure that we are not, all right. So, okay, should be this. Okay, so just make sure that you are indenting correctly. You can see now the importance of indentation. It will always give you an error if you don't indent properly. So you'll just take note of that. So now we've defined our function. So this is the definition part. So the second part of working with function is calling the function. So we've defined our function. Now, how can we use it? So to call our function, we just come and say multiply, put our brackets. So what are we going to put inside this bracket now? I need the responses. What are we going to put inside this bracket? We've defined our function here. Now it's time to call it. So exactly. So we are going to pass in arguments here. So our argument can be any number of our choice. So I can say multiply 4 and 6, right? If I run this, what am I going to get? I'm going to get 24, right? I can say multiply 9, 8, and 6. I'll get 48. I can say multiply 8 and 7. So I've basically defined a function. Now you can see anywhere I'm writing my code, I can just call multiply. I can just say, oh, multiply 34 and 76. You give me this number, right? So we've defined our function here already, right? So we can now call it and use it anywhere in our code. That is the beauty of functions. So it is it's something that you package and you can always use it anywhere you want. You understand? It has the same idea as a variable, right? You know, a variable or you can also call or reference a variable anywhere in your code as long as you've already assigned a value to it. The same thing as a function. As long as you've defined your function, you can now call it anywhere in your code. So instead of coming every time and performing the same operation, you can package it into a function. Do you understand? So that's basically what a function. We're going to actually give other examples, right? But let's quickly look at something else, because I told you can have a return statement here or not. So there are some cases where you want to assign or you want to pass your function output into a variable. So I can now say multiply 8 and this, and I come and say result. I'm basically assigning the output of this function to a variable, right? That is the essence of a return statement. If I don't have any return statement, there will be nothing that will be assigned to this result. I'm going to explain that very well. So if I run this and come here and print results, I'm going to get none, right? Because there was nothing was returned in my function, basically. So I'm going to get none. So the essence of return is that so that you can be able to pass the output or the value in our function to a variable. So if I come here and say, instead of print product, I come and say return product, and I run my function, and I come here and I run this code, and I say result equals to multiply 8, 7, and I say print result. You see that I'm getting 56 now, right? I'm getting 56 because you are actually returning something from our function to this variable. So you are not using print now. So print will just print it out for you to see. But return is more. I would advise you to use return, because return or actually will package the output, which is this product now, this value, and always assign it. If you are actually assigning your function to a variable, to assign the output value to that variable, and you can now use the variable to do other things, right? So when you're working now in Python, when you're doing a lot of complex stuff, you're going to understand the importance of returning a value in a function, right? So if you come here and just say print products, and I come here and you say the output of this result is going to always be none, right? Because there's no value you're returning. The reason why you are seeing 56 here is because there's a print statement in this particular function. So when we run the function, it will always print out the 56. So if I remove this, it will always print out the 56 because the function has a print statement here. You understand? So that is actually the essence of return. So as I said initially, the return statement is optional. You can choose to return, you can choose not to return. So you can have it either way. So I'll come here and just say return product. All right, so this is an example of a function. You can have very, very simple functions. You can as well have complex functions, right? So let's just look at some of the things we've done before. Okay, let's try to wrap this particular code now in. Okay, wait, let's look at something else. Okay, let's look at this particular code. So I'm going to get these names. I just want to give you another example so you see how we can use functions in Python. So no, not here. So I'm going to initialize this. And, so what I want to do now is that I'm going to write a function that will compare a new name with the names in this particular list, right? And if that name is not in this list, it's going to basically add the name to the list. So I can come here and say def add name, or let's say check name. And when writing your function name, just follow the same rules in writing a variable name, right? There should be no space. It should be in this particular case. So what type of case is this? Snake, is this a snake case or a camel case? Don't know if we still remember this. I believe we talked about it in the introductory part of Python. This is a snake case or a camel case? Exactly. Exactly. So now we can have this, right? You can actually have so I'll put my doc here and say writing this function will check if a name is present in the name list, right? So let's just write a very simple one to check if a name is present in a name. So in this particular bracket, I'm just going to put the parameter name, because when we are calling the function, we need to put the name here. So if you come to the function body, I can basically just say if name in names print yes, name is present in names, right? So some, like in this particular case now, we are not returning anything. There is nothing to return. So that is just to show you that it's not every time you use a return statement. So there are some functions that you don't need a return statement for. There are some functions that you need a return statement for, right? So now what we've done here basically is that we've created a function that takes a particular name and checks that name in this list of name. If the name is here, it's going to say, yes, this name is present. But if the name is not there, you'll say print name is not present in names, right? So let's remove this and put that here. So we've defined the function now, right? This is a function. You can just come anywhere in our code and call our function name and say check name, right? Check name. And you can put a name. We can put, let's say I want to check if my name Emmanuel is in. If I run this, you see that it gives me an output. Emmanuel is not present in names. If I come and say, let me check Sandra. Sandra is not present in name and say, check the girl. Oh, yes, Abigail is present. So this is like some of the things you can do with functions. Like you can just write the function, put a lot of things inside the function, and you can call it anytime and put an argument that will be executed on. So this is where creativity as a program starts. We've been doing a lot of things actually. We've been doing conditional statement, we've been doing for loop, we've been doing string formatting, we've been doing all of that. But function is when you now start actually writing code. This is when you start thinking, right? This is when you actually start doing stuff, doing things in Python. So you would notice that there's actually a leap from what we've been doing before. Like what we've been doing before, we're actually just straightforward, okay, this, that. But this one now, it now involves a bit of complexity, which is going to be easy if you take your time to understand it, right? So there is no, like, that's why we said user-defined function. It is up to you to know what it is that you want to define. So there is no like specific rule of defining a function. Like there's no specific kind of function that you should define. It depends on your use case. It depends on what you want to do. So you can be creative about it. Okay, I want to actually define a function that can do this particular thing. So what are the concepts I can bring in Python that I already know to achieve this? You can see in this particular case, I brought in a lot of things here. I brought in our list. So this can be a long list of all your students in your class, right? And maybe you want to just check if someone's name is there. Let's say this is the attendance list. You understand? We've put the attendance list here. So someone came to ask me, oh, Mr. Emmanuel, my name is not in the attendance list. So to be sure, I'll just ask them for their name. What is your name? Okay, my name is let's say Ibrahim. I say, okay, I'll put Ibrahim in my function and I'll run it. I'll say, oh, Ibrahim, your name is not in the attendance, so probably you didn't attend the class or you forgot to include your name. So these are the kind of applications of functions, although those are more complex applications, but I'm just giving you an idea of how to use these things. You understand? So I'll give you assignment definitely where you are going to write functions, right? But on your own, you can look for things that you can do, practice, right? So the sky is the limit when it comes to using Python. You understand? So, but just know that we have a specific use for Python. We are actually learning Python so we can do data science. So all these things I've been teaching us is just to introduce us to concepts in Python that are necessary for us to do data science. So we are not actually going to go deep into Python like that, because that one is going to actually take a lot of time. So you notice sometimes there's some concept that I'll just skip. I'll just say, this one is not really important. And this one. So those ones are the ones that you don't necessarily need because you might not even use it, right? So, but you can as well on your own go and look at them and just try to understand how they are used. But for the sake of data science and for the sake of this program, we are going to be looking at those things that you are required to know, right, to become a data scientist. So that's it for functions. We've looked at functions. We've looked at the different components of a functions or different parts of the functions. Look at how to define a function. We've looked at the types of functions that we have. We looked at calling a function, looked at parameters and arguments, right? So we've looked at return value. So we've looked at types of functions. We've looked at the built-in functions that we have in Python. We've looked at the user-defined functions that you can define as a programmer yourself to perform a specific task. We also have this function called lambda function, right? This is like a compressed version of function. So it's actually it has very specific use cases, right? You might not even use it that much, right? But just know that there's what we call lambda function. So we have that's it's called anonymous function. So that is it for function. That's it for function. I'm just trying to compress all this into the time we have. So let's see. What do we have again? So we are supposed to look at objects, but I just feel at this point, we've gotten a lot of information that we need to digest. So I don't want to overwhelm you with more information at this point. So tomorrow we are going to continue with objects in Python, right? So this is another very, very important thing to understand or to know. So all these things we've been doing so far, they're like building a house. Like you start from the foundation, you lay the foundation, you just ensure that everything is solid. Then you now start putting your block brick by brick. So that is basically what we've been doing. So for you to follow us and for you to be part of what we are doing and not to have any problem understanding, it's necessary that you understand everything that we've done so far up to this point. So if you've not, you can as well just go back and look at them, look at the classes that we've had. They are all uploaded on YouTube, and just ensure that those parts that you've not understand very well, you try as much as you can to just understand them. Because tomorrow we are going to be introducing in a library. We're now going to be introducing libraries that will be used for data science, right? So these first 2 weeks is just to introduce you to concepts in Python. I just give you an overall understanding, some of these concepts in Python. So when we are now starting to work with libraries and do data science and all of that, and data analysis and all of that, it will not be strange to you, and you won't really have problem working with them, right? So I would actually want to stop here for today, but before I do that, I'm going to just give me a minute here. Okay, yeah. So definitely we'll be taking questions, but before that, I think we have some concepts here in this control flow that I said we're going to look at. All right, so we'll look at break, continue, and else, right? So someone was asking, how do we use while and else? So we are going to just demonstrate them now. So these things are some things that you might not necessarily use a lot. That's why I skip them. but I'll still show us regardless in case you come in contact with it in any task that you're doing, right? So let's just quickly look at those implementations. So we have let's see, we have loop control statements. So we have three of them. Loop control statements, right? We have our. Is everyone still following? Is there? Let me be sure that everyone is still following. Please let me know in the group chat if you are still following the class and if you can hear me loud and clear. All right. All right. All right. Okay. Okay, so let's quickly go through this. So we have the first one, which is break. So now I've already told us how we can use our for loop. So let's say we want to iterate over a sequence, let's say for x in range 10. So you can see that I'm putting just one number here. So this is just start from 0 basically to 9. So for x in range 10, if now I'm going to show you how to use your break. If x is equals to 5, then break, else print x. So what this code is going to do is that normally your for loop is supposed to run through from from 0 to 9. So what I have here is, okay, let me remove this break first. So this is our for loop, right? For x in range 10, print x. So normally it's just going to run from 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. It's going to print every single thing, right? So, but if I include a break statement there, right? The break statement can be if x is equal to 5, then break. So what will happen here is that Python will look at this if statement. Okay, this person is asking me if x is equal to 5. So as it is going over the loop, it will come to a point where x is now equal to 5. So once it gets to this point, it will now break the loop. It will now stop the loop, right? So this is the way to control your loop. So sometimes you might not want it to run to the end of the sequence. You understand? You might want it to stop at a particular point. So this break statement will help you to control that. You understand? So that's actually very, very straightforward. So you have so let's see, you have this. Let's see if I put 4 here. You have this. If I say greater than 4, you have this, right? So you can just put any, depending on how you want your code to be executed, you can put the conditions here and then type break in this place, and then it's going to like stop at a particular point. So that is actually what happens in the break statement. So that is actually so straightforward. There is really nothing complicated about that. So now for is someone saying something? Hope everyone can hear me. Okay, okay, okay. I was thinking. All right, so that's it for break. Now for continue, continue is just almost the same thing. So if you have, let's say, if x is equals to 4, then continue. What continue will do is that it will skip this particular condition, right, and continue. So if it gets to this point that x is equals to 4, it will not execute that particular value, which is 4. You see here the output is 0, 1, 2, 3. When it got to 4, it skipped 4 and went to 5. So that's what continue does in this particular case. Understand? So if I say if x is equals to 5, it will skip 5. But if I say if x is greater than 5, if x is greater than 5, it will just stop at 5. Understand? So that's how you use break and continue. So you can just play around with it and see what it can do. So it's not something you'll use very, very often. So the same thing happens in while loop. You can use the same idea in while loop and break and continue. So just apply that to while loop. Because of time, we're not really going to go into that. So for the else statement, we have break, continue, and else. So for else is just there. Like I don't really see the need for else, but else will be executed if your loop is complete, if your loop executes completely. So if I execute my loop and I come and say print this loop has been successfully executed. So the else will always be executed, right? This is not like the else in the if statement, right? So this, I really don't understand, although there are specific, very specific use cases for else in your for loop or while loop. But that is why I didn't want to really dwell much on it because you might not be using it a lot, right? So this is just how you use else in your loop, whether while loop or for loop. So anything I'm saying here, it applies to while loop, right? So you can just use the same idea. So this else will always execute as long as your loop is executed successfully. So that is just it basically. So if you put break here, you can see that your engineer execute because your loop did not complete, right? It stopped at a particular point. So it did not go to the end of the sequence. So the else will not be executed. So it's just to show, the else is just an indicator that your loop has been completely executed. Like it has gone over the loop, you understand, successfully. So that is it for break, that's it for continue, and that's it for else. You can see the explanation here. The break exits the loop and skips the execution of the remaining iterations. For continue, it keeps the rest of the code inside the loop for the current iteration and moves to the next iteration. So depending on your condition, it will skip that loop and move to the next one. So for else, it executes a block of code once the loop condition becomes false. The else block after a while or for loop only executes if the loop complete normal without encountering a break statement. So that is it for else, right? So once you include a break statement, that means your loop breaks, it did not complete, you understand? But once it completes, you always have the else statement executed, right? So that's it for this three control statement. So don't rack your brain so much about it, right? So all the ones that we've talked about before, try to digest them and understand them. These ones, if you have more time, you can actually go over them and also gain better understanding on how they work, and also as well do some practice, right? So that's it for that. I think we are going to be rounding up here. Right. So tomorrow we'll continue from where we stop, which is object in Python. So I just think I should look at this lambda statements. But yeah, I think we'll do that tomorrow. So let's stop here for today. We actually looked at a lot, so you can actually have time to go over them and just digest the ones you've learned today. All right. So exactly. Someone asks if break can be used to control infinite loop. Yeah, you can actually use it to control an infinite loop. Understand? But yeah, you can just try a lot of things. You understand? But the thing about infinite loop is that you are not increasing anything or decreasing anything. So if you say something is equal to something and that thing is true, right? Unless you increase it, you try to use an increment operation and then you now put your break statement there, right? You'll be able to control that. So that's it for today. I'm going to be stopping here for now and taking questions. So please, if you have questions, just
Oh shit. Good afternoon, sir. What's going on here now?
Kelvin, please ask your question. Please ask your question. Hello, Kelvin, you're on mute. Please, can you ask your question? All right. Um, James, do you have a question? I think you raised your hand the other time, but I couldn't hear you. All right, so I'll be assuming that everyone understood what was taught today. This one that nobody wants to ask a question. That's fine. So okay, all right. Please, if you have a question, just raise your hand. I think I was mute at a point. I didn't know I was mute and I was talking. I think that was actually on my end. Okay, so I'm going to take Peter. Peter, please ask your question. Unmute yourself and ask your question. Hello, Peter. All right, I think you're having issues with your network. All right, Justice Manasseh, ask your question, please. You're on mute.
Good evening, sir.
Yeah, good evening.
Thanks for this great lecture today. I wanted you to help me repeat the difference between a while loop and for loop, sir.
Okay, so please just because of time, you have to just go over the video when it's available. Um, we don't have enough time to go over that again. Right. So unless you want a
Okay.
specific, you want to have, you need a
Just
specific clarification, then I can go for. But repeating them, no, I don't think that is going to be possible again.
I
So
made there's a point you made mention of while using the, you say while loop works on conditions, then the for loops works on one certain things. I just wanted to capture
Yeah, the for loop works on sequences, right?
sequences.
You need to have sequence, like your list, your string, your dictionary, your tuple, your set, or even your range. I introduced the range function to you that can create sequence of numbers. Understand? So
Yes.
your for loop works on sequence, while loop works on condition. I
Okay.
think that is it.
Yes.
All right.
Thank you.
So please just try to be specific, right? Because as going over the difference, it is not specific. I was thinking you needed me to start the nation
No,
from
no,
scratch, right?
no, sir. No, sir.
Okay, so thank
Thank
you.
you.
Would have yeah, James, please you can unmute yourself and ask your question.
Good evening, sir. Good evening, everyone.
Yeah, good evening.
Okay, my question is just simple, sir. What do you use for your copy and paste in Excel? Because when I tried the regular shortcode now, that is Control C and Control V, it's not working. But I saw you using something. You do something. You copy and paste. So I just wanted to know what shortcode you are using here in Python for that.
Yeah, it's actually the same control C. Can you mute your okay? It's actually the same control C and control V that I'm using. So I don't know why it isn't working for you, but there is nothing more. That is just the basic copy and paste that I'm using for my own copy and paste. So you can check if there is a problem with your own. So um yeah, so that does that for that. So I'll look at think Okoli Precious or Kelvin. Yeah, Kelvin hands were up. All right, Kelvin, please unmute yourself and ask your question. We can't hear you. I can't hear you anything you're saying. I can't hear you. All right. Okay. Yeah, I'll call you Precious. Please ask your question.
Good evening, sir.
Yeah, good evening.
Thank you for the class. I really learned, although I joined a bit late. I want to ask about when we want to comment in our digital notebook. There is a point where you highlighted your summer bigger in size, as in the font size is bigger. I've been trying it and it's not been working for me.
Sorry, I didn't get you. Can you come again?
So can you explain how you do that? How you increase your font? I said when you are commenting
Yeah,
in your digital notebook,
yeah.
there is a point where you make your comment bigger, like you highlight it, then you make the font size bigger, bolder than other bodies of this thing. I've been trying it in the cell. It's not been working for me, so I don't know if you can please pull me through that.
I don't think I completely understand, but let me share my screen to know if um okay. Do you mean this particular comment? This like example, like this comment that I have here now. This
Yeah,
so how like I didn't make it any bigger, so I didn't understand your
yeah.
question. So what do you mean? Your network is kind of bad, so I can't hear you clearly.
In the first assignment you gave us,
Yeah.
there are some. Hello, can you hear me
Or
now?
do you mean this
I
thing
think in the
this
first
thing here?
assignment you gave us, there are some places okay, like Now, function in Python, yeah.
Yeah, this is a. Were you present in the first class we had?
Yes, I was.
Yeah, I explained this then. This is a markdown. This is a markdown. So we can go over the class because I explained all these things there in the introduction to
So
Python and Jupyter Notebook. So
that's
this is
fine.
basically a markdown, and there are different ways to style it. This is not a code. You can't write code in this. You can only write text that you can style in the markdown cell. So that is just that's how you make this thing different or bigger or bolder. Right? You can see here you can select any one that you want based on what you want to do. So you can have your code cell and you can have your markdown cell. All right. So if you, let's say you create a new cell now with this plus, you can come here and change it to markdown, or you can leave it as code. So if it's code, you can write your code. If it's markdown, you can't write code. You can only write text that you can style and bold and make bigger. So the particular syntax for all those things, I've explained them already. So go. I think the second recording, yes, I think in the introductory part of the recording, you will see that was what I introduced with there. So you can't really go over that again today because we've done that already.
Thank you.
So okay, what do we have again? We have Ali Wasaram Abba. Please, can you unmute yourself and ask your question?
Good afternoon, sir.
Yeah.
Good day. My question, sir. I cannot access to Jupyter app. I did it in my system. It cannot access to me. What can I do?
Do you have Anaconda downloaded?
Anaconda.
Anaconda.
I don't have, sir. Can you help me with the link or something?
Are you just joining us?
I use Chrome and internet for that thing in my system.
Are you just joining us?
Yeah.
When? Is this your first class?
No, sir. It's my, I think it's second. It's my second class.
We've actually looked at all these things before. Like this is the third week. We had a class where we installed and
the problem, sir. The first week, I cannot have access to the class. I talked to you in the second week. Kindly talk to the Derek. He can, and then he sent me the mail of joining of the class last week. So I cannot access to the Jupyter app.
All right. You know what you do? You meet your class rep. You know your class rep, right? Mohammed Usman. Yeah. So just meet him. He would put you through, or you're the assistant.
Okay.
All right.
Thank you, sir.
All right. Patience, please go ahead and ask your question. Patience, unmute yourself.
Good evening, sir. And good evening, everybody. So please, I didn't get the statement you made about arguments and parameter, the difference between arguments and parameter when defining a function.
Okay. So arguments are parameters. First of all, they have to do with functions. When you are defining your function, what you call them is what? Parameter. But when you are calling your function, what you call them is arguments. That is just the difference.
Okay.
Right?
Thank you, sir.
The thing is just that sometimes some persons might interchange it. So it can be easily interchanged, which is not a big problem at all. But it's important that you still know the difference. So in case there are specific situations where you need to explain them and their differences. So argument is when you define your function, but you want to call it the value you put there is called argument. But when you are defining the function, the value you put is called parameter. Do you understand?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Thank you, sir.
Are you sure you understand?
Yes, I did.
All right. You hesitated at first, that's why I asked. Okay, so let's call on someone else. So God knows, please ask your question.
Okay, good evening, sir. Thank you for the classes. Okay, first, before I ask
Your voice is, I can't hear you. I can barely hear you. Your voice is so faint.
Okay, good evening, sir. Can you hear now?
Yeah. Good evening.
Okay, so before I ask my question, permit me to quickly respond to a question one lady asked about the size of fonts.
The what?
About the size, the lady that asked a question concerning the fonts sizes.
Okay.
So permit me to just respond to her. I wish she's listening now. Okay, Ma. So in case you're listening, I quite understood what you asked, and the answer to that is the largeness of your text, that is for the markdown, depends on the number of hash you use for the text. For example, if you use one hash for your text, it will give you the boldest text. If you use two, it will reduce. So the number of hash you use is what will either make it bold as you like or reduce. But the boldest will be when you use one hash for your markdown text. I just hope you've heard and understood. Okay, so to my question, sir, do we have a do while loop in Python? That is more like the alternate or the opposite of the while loop, where okay, while this is happening, execute this. So do we have the do while loop where it executes while this is going on, like do this while this condition is on?
Okay. I believe that should be from a different programming language. This, what I've explained today, what I showed us today, are the loops we have in Python. There is nothing, there is just for loops and while loops. And
Oh,
I think the idea of do while is still the same idea in the while loop. Why a condition is given, if it's true, then the preceding block of code is the action, right? So you don't need to add any additional statement there. So Python makes it simpler. I think which programming language is that is that coming from, or are you talking from?
okay, no, that should be C, sir.
Okay, yeah. So that is just a different. It's just a difference in syntax, but it's still the same idea that is being implemented. Understand?
Okay,
So
sir.
Python is just straightforward and simple,
Okay,
as I've said several times. So yeah.
okay, sir. Last question, sir. Please, sir, when running a loop, is there any way we could do a selective while loop? Like what I mean is we have a list of numbers 1 to 10, and then we only want it we only want the execution to run on even numbers. So while the condition is met on an even number, it executes maybe a +1 or a +2, and then continues to the next even number and executes a +1 or +2.
Yeah, you can do that. Can do that. You have to do that using your control flow. That is the one I just mentioned. That is the
Okay.
continue. Um, you would use the conditional statement, but in your conditional statement, you use your modulus. So to screen out or select the even number, you can say if x modulus 2 is equals to 0. So that statement alone it's going to just bring out the even numbers, right? Because even numbers, they are numbers that are divisible by this thing. So
True.
it will give you it will give you those even numbers, and you can now perform your operation on those numbers and you print them out using continue. So it's possible. As I said, there are a lot of things you can actually do. We don't exhaust the examples. It's not even possible
Mhm.
to go through all the examples that we can go through, right? So that is why personal practice is very, very important, because you come across a lot of cases or examples that you might not even be taught anywhere. You understand? So yeah, you can
Okay.
actually also look at it on your own to see how it works, right? So yeah, that is a good
Okay.
question too.
Thank you, sir.
All right. We are actually going so fast. So I think I take one more question. One more question. All right. Okay. Yeah, Julia, please ask a question. You should ask a question.
Yeah, good evening, Mr. Emmanuel.
Yeah, good evening, sir.
Good evening. Please, I want to make an appeal for something. Um, Hello.
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay, yeah. So I appreciate this opportunity, and I really, really enjoy your classes and how you are teaching and how you've been trying your best to be patient with us, especially for those of us that are beginners. But I want to plead that if it will be possible for us to be a little bit more time conscious. I don't know. Because like today, in as much as like for me, before the class started, I was suggesting like for those of us that are MCs or do other things for Saturdays and all, and then I really want to follow every class bit by bit. So I've tried to adjust all my schedules, and like today, I was planning that at most 5:30 will be done since the normal time is supposed to be from 3 to 5. And it's already 7 minutes to 6, and we are still here. So I just wanted to plead with something that we can look at and try to consider. It's just an appeal, though, because I really want to be part of everything. That's just it. Thank you.
All right. All right. Yeah, thank you for that. Yeah. So the thing is that if you actually the official time is from 3 to 6. Saturdays 3 to 6, and then Sundays 5 to 7. So, but the thing is that I try my best not to actually exhaust the entire 3 hours. So most of the time we spend just 2 hours. You can see the previous classes we've done is just 2 hours that we spend in class, right? 2 hours and few minutes, and let's say 2 hours at most 30 minutes. But the official time for each class is usually 3 hours. That is 3 to 6. So we we actually not overshooting, right? So if you check the official curriculum, you see it there. But I try my own personal best to, because I understand that sometimes if you spend so much time listening to lectures, like it's going to be so overwhelming and you might get tired and all those things. So I understand them. And yeah, so that's why I try to compress the time to just 2 hours. So today is just quite different. It's usually not this, or we don't really overshoot like this. Just we started the class the main class late, right? I think around 2:30 something. That was when I started like teaching. So that was why we are having it run into we actually run late. So yeah, I'm taking note of that. So I hope next subsequent classes we're going to be maintaining time. So yeah. All right, Marcelinos, please unmute yourself and speak. Ask your question, sir. You're on mute. Yeah, Marcellinus, you're on mute. You've been asking me that you've been kind of pointing me to a question. So unmute yourself, please, and ask a question.
Okay. Good evening.
Yeah,
Uh,
good evening, sir.
you said range function takes a sequence.
Yeah.
Now, I want to ask, string 2 is a sequence. So can string be accepted with a range function?
I didn't say range function takes sequence. I said range function generates sequence.
Okay. Okay.
And the
Okay. It's
sequence is
clear.
usually a number.
And the sequence is number. That's exactly what I wanted to ask. That can it generate string? That
No, it
is, you
can't.
give it.
Just integers.
No.
Just
Hello, sir.
integers. Just
Okay.
integers. Just integers.
Okay. 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 It doesn't work with string.
Yeah,
Okay.
it doesn't.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
All right. So yeah, Nicodemus, please ask your question. Nicodemus, please ask your question.
Good evening, sir.
Yeah, good evening, sir.
Sir, mine is not actually a question about this class today. I don't know what is happening. It's concerning our assignment. You taught us
All
how
right.
to be doing our assignment, and that is what I've been doing. I did my assignment on Jupyter Notebook, saved the file as an IPYNB as you instructed. I downloaded it and then uploaded to the Google Classroom before I turned in the assignment. It was returned 0/10. I didn't understand. Even if you want, I can share my screen now. Right now, you will see what I've done. It's still here on the
All
Jupyter
right.
Notebook.
Just send me a DM with your class. Just right away.
It's all right, sir.
All right.
Thank you, sir.
Okay. So Nicholas, please ask your question and then we'll wrap up. Nicholas, you were raising your hand. You're on mute now, so you can ask your question. Nicholas Ben. All right. So since we I have unmute Peter like I think twice, and I don't know what's happening on your end, but I've not been hearing you. So I'm going to do it this last time. So I'm unmuting you now so you can ask your question. I hope you've been able to sort out the network issue. I don't know if you are speaking, but I can't hear you. All right. So you can ask a question on the Q&A group chat. So I'm going to look at that and answer. So that's it for today, guys. We've come to the end of today. I believe you all learned something. We are diving deeper into Python. I believe you should be able to feel it. You can feel it at this point that yes, we are actually touching some things, like we are going deeper and it's becoming more interesting. So just continue practicing. That is the only way you are going to keep afloat, and that is the only way you are going to um, just follow along with what we'll be doing subsequently and in the next classes. So tomorrow we'll continue from where we stopped today and also introduce us to something new. And thanks for your time. Today we actually spent quite a lot of time. Normally it's 3 to 6, which is the normal time. So we are actually technically we are within time. But personally, I don't like to go some. I don't like to spend the entire time unless it is absolutely necessary. So, but yeah, that's just it for today. Please, as usual, drop what you've learned in the group chats. Whatever it is that you picked up from today's class, just let me know. If it's something, a point, 2, 3, 4, as many as you can, let us see it, and I'll be in the group chat reacting to them. So thank you very much for your time, and enjoy the rest of your day.